So this video is going to be looking at the sources that portray Augustus's death and honours given to him after death. The three sources we're going to be looking at are Suetonius Augustus coin and Suetonius Tiberius. So you need to find the right section in your source book, which should be labelled Augustus's death and honours. So we're going to start with Suetonius Augustus, which is essentially going to talk through literally Augustus dying and then the honours that come after and his will. So according to Suetonius, so Augustus was sort of dying over quite a few days. So he's freaking inquired by the rumours that ills were causing a popular disturbance. So we could think about the idea that perhaps also Augustus was quite concerned about the popularity of himself with the plebs. Talks about he wants a mirror, he combs his hair, he's really ill. In terms of like sources for essays, this is not a particularly helpful section, to be completely honest. It talks about his family coming around him, and then he dies, and that's about it really for this first section of Suetonius. So he's maybe a bit worried about whether the plebs are unhappy that he's dying, or he possibly wants them to be unhappy that he's dying, and then he actually dies. So then Suetonius continues. So Augustus died in the same room as his father in 14 AD, about 3 p.m, in case you were curious, and tells you who the consuls, who are nobody important. So, and he would have been 76, so he was 75 when he died. So senators from the neighbouring municipalities and veteran colonies bore the body. So we can show here that there is obviously support from the Senate for Augustus, because they carry the body, and neighbouring municipalities will be sort of colonies in the provinces, as well as in veteran colonies as well. So they carry his body all the way from Nola, from where he died, to Bolivie, but at night because it was really hot, and then from Bolivie a part of the Romanites carried it forward to his house. So we could show here that he has lots of support from all parts of society. So he's got senators, he's got the provincials, he's got veterans, he's got the knights. Everybody supports Augustus even after death. So the senators vied with one another in proposing posthumous honours for Augustus. So they're trying to honour him after death, again showing that the senators were generally supporting Augustus. And then there's lots of different notions that are put forward. So they sort of suggest that the funeral procession should pass through the triumphal gate, preceded by the image of victory from the Senate house. Boys and girls of nobility should sing his dirge. On David's cremation, iron rings should be worn instead of gold ones. So his ashes should be gathered by priests of the leading colleges. The name of the month of Augustus should be transferred to September, because Augustus had been born in September but died in a month now called August. And the whole period between his birth and death should be officially entered in the calendar as the Augustan age. So these are just things put forward. So you can show that this obviously showing that the Senate appears to support Augustus completely and wanted to honour him after his death. Though it was decided not to pay him excessive honours. So they decide not to do all of this stuff, but they do other things. So he's given 2 funeral eulogies, one by Tiberius, his stepson, who's been adopted as his heir, from the forecourt of Julius Caesar's temple, and then by Tiberius' son Drusus, from the old rostra, after which a party of senators shouldered the body and took it to a pyre on the Campus Martius, where it was burned. So again, you've got senators being at the centre of the funeral. And the next praetor actually swore he'd seen Augustus' spirit soaring up to heaven through the flames. I'm sure he did. Leading knights barefoot, wearing unbelted tunics, and collected his ashes and placed them at the family mausoleum, which still stands in Rome, although it's in the process of being renovated, so you can't actually go into it at the moment. He had built this himself during his 6th consulship between the Flavian Way and the Tiber, at the same time converting the neighbourhood into a public park. Key thing here is Augustus is obviously clearly very well supported, and people are very upset that he has died. So then we get the reading of Augustus's will. So Augustus's will, composed on the 3rd of April the previous year, while these 2 guys were consuls, has 2 notebooks written in his own hand, and also of his freedmen. So we've got the Vestal Virgins were keeping hold of it, and they now produce them as 3 rolls sealed by him. All of these are read in the house, that's the Senate house. So it proved that he had appointed Tiberius and Livia heirs to the bulk of his estate, as you would expect, directing that Tiberius should take 2/3 and adopt the name Augustus. So it's at this point for the emperors where the title, remember, Augustus isn't his real name. His name's obviously Gaius Octavian, sorry. But obviously Augustus means revered one, so that now becomes handed down through the emperors. So if you're being a pedantic, which I am, Augustus was never technically an emperor, but with the handing over of titles like Augustus to Tiberius and the later emperors, that's when emperorship technically starts. But you don't need to write that in an essay, I'm just being really pedantic here. While Livia took the remaining third and adopted the name Augusta. The heirs in the second degree were to be Tiberius' son Drusus, entitled to 1/3 of the reversion, and Germanicus with his 3 sons jointly entitled to the remainder. So this is all kind of like Augustus's family. So obviously his stepson had been adopted as son. So after Tiberius comes Drusus, he would be the next heir, and then Germanicus, and then the 3 sons, and so on. Many of Augustus' relatives and friends figured among the heirs in the third degree. He also left a bequest of 400,000 gold pieces to the Roman commons in general. So this is quite important for us, hence why it's highlighted. So it shows that even after death, Augustus is trying to keep the plebs happy by giving out lots and lots of coins. He then gives out further 35,000 to some tribes with his family connections. There's more plebs. 10 to every praetorian guardsman, 5 to every member of the city cohorts, 3 to every legendary soldier. I can't say that word today. Soldier. There we go. So this is kind of, you could suggest, showing where his priorities were in trying to ensure he had support. Plebs come first because they're the most important. Obviously the praetorian guard looked after him. The city itself, again, was gaining money, and then obviously to the soldiers afterwards. So these legacies were paid on the nail because he'd always kept enough cash for the purpose. There were other minor bequests, such as some as large as 200 gold pieces, which were not settled until after his death, although we don't get the rest of that particular sentence. My heirs were not received, says Augustus' will actually being read to us. My heirs will not receive more than 1.5 million gold pieces, for although my friends bequeathed me some 14 million for the last 20 years, in fact we will have that as highlighting, showing he has a huge amount of support amongst senators and the equestrians, because obviously they're giving him lots of money, or bequesting him lots of money in their wills. Nearly the whole of the sum, besides what came to me from my father, from my adoptive father, and from others, has been used for the benefit of the state. But he's pointing out that he hasn't kept the money for himself, and it's not handing it out to everybody. He's actually been using it to sort of restore the republic and make it better. He'd given orders that should anything happen to his daughter Julia or his granddaughter, also called Julia, their bodies must be excluded from the mausoleum. So remember, his daughter and granddaughter had embarrassed him through varying misdeeds, but mainly affairs. So even after they die, they're not allowed to be brought back into the family. Just shows how much he holds a grudge. Of the 3 sealed rolls containing directions for his own funeral, another third a record of his reign, which he wished to be engraved on bronze and posted at the entrance of the mausoleum. So that bit there is literally the res gestae. The third, a statement of how many serving troops were stationed in different parts of the empire, what money reserves were held by the public treasury and the privy purse, and what revenues were due for collection. So you could point out here that this shows how much power Augustus had over the republic, because obviously he has all the information, he knows where all the soldiers were, he has all the money, well, not all the money, but how he's aware of all the money. So does he restore the republic if he has all this power over these areas? Possibly not. He also supplied the names of freedmen and slave secretaries who could furnish details under these heads on demand. Okay. So then we have a coin that is published a long time after Augustus's death. So we're talking about 20 years later. And what we do have is we have a statue of Augustus has also been erected, and it's being sort of paraded in a chariot, and it's holding a laurel branch. Remember, laurel obviously is about victory. So obviously what we have here is Tiberius linking himself to the divine Augustus. So Augustus would have become a deity on death. So he's linking him for religious purposes to sort of show that, you know, he has Augustus's blessing and he's related to a god. And obviously Augustus was generally very popular, and it links himself to that as well to make Tiberius popular himself. It also shows that after his death that Augustus was in fact changed into a deity, and there's a statue of him, so he's clearly very, very popular. So that's why that coin can be used in quite a lot of different sections. Then we have a really short section from Suetonius about Tiberius. So with Agrippa out the way, I'm pretty certain he's referring to Agrippa Posthumus here, because the Agrippa has been long dead, so I'm assuming it's Agrippa Posthumus. Tiberius used his own Tribunican power to convene the Senate and break the news of Augustus's death. So Tiberius begins to take control. After reading a few words of prepared speech, he suddenly groaned aloud and, protesting that grief had robbed him of his voice, that he wishes his life would also be taken, handed the scroll to his son Drusus the Younger, who finished the task. Whether Tiberius is acting, who knows? I mean, he did bring him up from birth, so I'd like to think he wasn't acting, that he was upset. Augustus's will was then brought in, and a freedman read it aloud. All senators present who'd witnessed the document, first being called upon, acknowledged their seals. Witnesses of lower rank would presently do the same outside the house. The preamble to the will ran as follows: Since fate has cruelly carried off my sons Gaius and Lucius, also remember they're his grandsons that he had adopted, Tiberius shall inherit 2/3 of my property, and then it goes through the rest of the will that Suetonius mentioned earlier. This wording strengthened the suspicion that Augustus had nominated Tiberius as successor only for want of any other better choice, which is probably quite true. So remember, Augustus had quite literally gone through the rest of his family on the Julian bloodline before he adopted Tiberius as his successor. But this is going to be a bit of an issue for Tiberius in terms of setting up his own rule, which the next source video will start to look at.